Audio Coffee here, and welcome back to part two of my explainer on why postmodern deconstruction manipulates you every time. In part one, I gave examples of deconstruction so that you could recognize it.
Women
Are you?
having pregnancies?
Do you believe that men can get pregnant?
In part two, we will discuss what the specific strategies of deconstruction are and apply them strategically to cartoonishly simple examples in order to gain better understanding of how the manipulation works. And in part three, I will give actionable tips on how to combat deconstruction. If you didn't see part one, I recommend going back to view it because we're going to jump right into this topic of postmodern deconstruction. Okay, it's about time I get more specific to what is the strategy of deconstruction. But first, I have to say, this video is not going to be an exhaustive history of deconstruction, but there are two things you need to know about before we can move on. One, deconstruction came out of postmodern philosophy as a practice of deconstructing meaning out of text, and was coined by Jacques Derrida as a form of literary criticism. However, the postmodernists ended up deconstructing everything to the point that they became nihilistic, which is to say they reject all religious and moral principles, believing life to be meaningless. And the point two, eventually other academics, especially those in the grievance studies, picked up and started running with their own version of deconstruction, which is a bad faith and non-neutral version of deconstruction that aims to drain their opponents of any epistemic authority, just means they throw out bad faith questions to try to make you look like you don't know what you're talking about, and that they do know what they're talking about in order to steamroll you in the conversation. Let me give a cartoonishly simple example of this in action that is easy to follow. This example comes from @localdistance on Twitter, which everyone should follow him, and I will link below. So pretend that you make a statement saying, I know what a pile of leaves is. If I were to ask you from 1 to 10 how confident you are in that statement, I believe most of you would say a 9 or a 10. But now let me stand in the shoes of someone who wants to deconstruct that statement. So you know what a pile of leaves is, huh? Well, is 20 leaves a pile of leaves? What about 10? Is 5 a pile? 2? Why not 2 if 10 is? Okay, so now 2 is? What about if I have 100 leaves laying on the ground next to each other, barely overlapping? Is that not a pile? Why not? Can you tell me why that isn't a pile of leaves? Do you really think that you should be here making claims of what a pile of leaves is if you can't even answer these basic questions? Okay, if that sounds like I was being nitpicky to deliberately miss the point, then I have to say, great, you get it, because that is essentially what deconstruction is. That is the TLDR here. Deconstruction is to nitpick to deliberately miss the point so that the other person can try to drain you of your epistemic authority and steamroll you in the conversation. So you may be asking, how did I formulate my deconstruction of a pile of leaves? Is there a template that can be used against any argument? And actually, yes. And the best summary, which I'm about to provide, comes again from @localdistance on his highly recommended Substack. This should not be understood as an exhaustive list, but here's what they do. 1. Blur the lines and boundaries which define concepts of ideas. Essentially, you find edge cases and cast doubt. 2. Subvert the meaning of an idea by seeking to invert it or undercut its legitimacy. An example of this is the person who came up with a particular idea is problematic for X, Y, and Z reasons. 3. Attempt to show that ideas to truth are socially constructed and that they are always influenced and corrupted by biased people. 4. Argue that claims to truth are really claims to power. 5. Endlessly reinterpret, reframe, decontextualize, and recontextualize anything that has meaning and claim that there is no single right, correct way to interpret anything that has meaning. Going back to my pile of leaves example, I only used one of these postmodern tactics, which was that I blurred the lines and boundaries by mentioning questionable edge cases of what can be considered a pile of leaves. To demonstrate the manipulative power of postmodern deconstruction, let's use another cartoonishly simple example, but I will apply 3 to 4 deconstruction tactics to this one. So tell me, 1 to 10, how confident are you that you know what a stack of books is? So you're claiming to know what a stack of books is, huh? What does a stack of books look like? Well, is 2 books a stack of books? What if the books are only 5 pages each? Why isn't one 500-page book a stack of books? What if it has many short stories in it? How is that not a stack of books, but 2 or 3 5-page books is a stack of books? And all the examples you are giving include traditional forms of books made out of paper pages with a cover. I could have a hard drive with almost every book in the English language, and you are trying to tell me that that would not be a stack of books? Don't you think you're providing an outdated understanding of what a book medium is? And your example in your head of paper books with a cover shows your Western bias, even in this benign stack of books example. Did you ever stop to think of the Asian tradition of scroll writing? Why wouldn't a number of scrolls, which are just long sheets of paper on a shelf, be a stack of books? Are you really trying to say that two rolled up pieces of paper in a scroll form should not be considered a pile of books because you want to hold on to your precious image of what a stack of books is at the expense of Asian cultures? Relax. Don't worry. You know what a stack of books is. I was just engaging in bad faith, manipulating you with the tactic of deconstruction. But take a moment and imagine this tactic being applied in a more serious example. Maybe a school board meeting where merit based evaluations are being problematized. Or, in the name of equity, there are calls to get rid of standardized testing. How prepared are you for when an activist tries to deconstruct your concerns? If you want to know how to combat this powerful strategy, then I'll see you in part 3. And with that, I'm Audio Coffee. Please like and subscribe so you don't miss the next video. And I'll see you next time.